Every day, millions of Americans walk through urban landscapes shaped by one man's visionary genius, yet his name appears on no historical plaques, no architecture textbooks, and no museum exhibitions celebrating the designers who built modern civilization. He created the revolutionary blueprint that transformed American cities from chaotic industrial nightmares into livable metropolitan centers with parks, highways, and public spaces that defined 20th-century urban planning. His radical ideas about integrating nature with city infrastructure became the standard model copied worldwide. Yet when historians list the great American architects, his name is conspicuously absent. This is the story of Daniel Burnham, the forgotten architect whose comprehensive city plans redesigned America, and how his monumental legacy was systematically erased by professional rivals who resented his success and the establishment that refused to acknowledge a man who challenged their architectural orthodoxy. Born in 1846 in rural New York, Daniel Hudson Burnham grew up in a world where American cities were nightmarish industrial zones choked with smoke, garbage, and overcrowded tenement buildings. His family moved to Chicago when he was 9, and the young boy watched the rapidly growing Midwestern city struggle with the chaos of unplanned expansion. Daniel dreamed of becoming an architect, but he failed the entrance examination to Harvard and Yale twice, his academic record too poor to gain admission to the prestigious universities. Instead, he apprenticed with architectural firms in Chicago, learning the profession through practical experience rather than theoretical education, a background that would later make academic architects dismiss his work as unsophisticated. In 1873, at age 27, Burnham partnered with John Wellborn Root to form their own architectural practice. The partnership was extraordinarily successful, with Root handling the artistic design work while Burnham managed the business side and client relationships. They built office towers, hotels, and residential buildings across Chicago, becoming one of the most prominent architectural firms in the rapidly expanding city. Then came the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, which destroyed huge sections of the city and created an unprecedented opportunity for urban reconstruction. Burnham and Root were at the center of Chicago's rebirth, designing innovative buildings that pushed the boundaries of what was architecturally possible. They pioneered the use of steel frame construction that allowed buildings to rise higher than ever before, creating the first true skyscrapers that would define the American urban skyline. Their masonry building in 1882 rose 16 stories, a height that astonished contemporary observers who believed such tall structures were structurally impossible. The Rookery building they completed in 1888 became an iconic example of Chicago school architecture, combining structural innovation with beautiful decorative elements. If you want to discover more visionary architects and designers whose revolutionary work was erased from history, subscribe now and activate the notification bell. Every week, we reveal the untold stories of creative geniuses who shaped the modern world but were denied recognition by those who took credit for their innovations. In 1890, Daniel Burnham received a commission that would change his career and American architecture forever. He was appointed chief of construction for the world's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, a massive international fair celebrating the 400th anniversary of Columbus's arrival in America. The project was monumentally ambitious, requiring the construction of an entire temporary city covering more than 600 acres along the shores of Lake Michigan. Burnham brought together the greatest American architects, artists, and landscape designers to create what became known as the WHITE City, a stunning vision of neoclassical buildings, lagoons, and carefully planned public spaces. The Columbian Exposition opened in 1893 and attracted more than 27 million visitors during its 6-month run. People came from around the world and were absolutely stunned by the beautiful white buildings reflected in artificial lagoons, the carefully designed walkways and public parks, and the harmonious integration of architecture with landscape design. The White City presented a radical alternative vision for American cities, showing that urban environments could be beautiful, organized, and designed for human enjoyment rather than purely industrial efficiency. Visitors returned to their crowded industrial cities and began demanding that municipal governments adopt similar comprehensive planning approaches. Tragically, John Root died suddenly in 1891, leaving Burnham to complete the exposition alone. The loss devastated him personally, but it also meant that when the WHITE City opened to international acclaim, Burnham alone received the credit and recognition. This would later fuel resentment among architectural rivals who claimed Burnham had built his reputation on Root's genius while lacking true artistic talent himself. After the exposition's success, cities across America began requesting that Burnham develop comprehensive city plans for their urban areas. In 1902, he was commissioned to create a master plan for Washington, D.C., transforming the nation's capital from a muddy, disorganized collection of government buildings into the grand monumental core we recognize today. His Macmillan Plan extended the National Mall, established the locations for major monuments and memorials, and created a coherent vision for the capital that would guide its development for over a century. The Lincoln Memorial, the arrangement of museums along the Mall, the reflecting pools and memorial parks that define Washington, D.C. today all follow Burnham's original vision. His most ambitious work came in 1909 with the Plan of Chicago, a comprehensive urban redesign that remains one of the most influential city planning documents ever created. Burnham spent 3 years developing a complete vision for transforming Chicago from an industrial nightmare into a livable modern metropolis. His plan called for a coordinated network of parks, LAKEFRONT development, diagonal boulevards cutting through the city's grid pattern, and the preservation of open space for public recreation. He argued that cities must be designed not just for commercial efficiency but for the health, happiness, and cultural enrichment of their residents. The Plan of Chicago introduced revolutionary concepts that became fundamental to modern urban planning. Burnham proposed creating a ring of forest preserves around the city to prevent urban sprawl and provide natural recreation areas. He designed an integrated highway system decades before automobiles became common, anticipating the transportation needs of the future. He called for the development of Chicago's lakefront as public parkland rather than industrial zones, a decision that gave the city its most beloved public spaces. His vision included cultural institutions, museums, and civic buildings arranged to create a sense of urban identity and pride. The plan of Chicago was revolutionary not just in its specific proposals but in its fundamental approach to urban design. Burnham argued that cities needed comprehensive planning rather than piecemeal development, that municipal governments should think decades ahead rather than responding to immediate crises. He believed that good urban design could improve social conditions, reduce crime, and create healthier, happier citizens. These ideas seem obvious today, but in 1909 they were radical propositions that challenged how American cities had developed since the Industrial Revolution. Chicago adopted large portions of Burnham's plan, spending decades implementing his vision. The lakefront parks, Michigan Avenue's development, the forest preserves surrounding the city, and the diagonal boulevards cutting through the urban grid all came directly from his comprehensive plan. Other cities studied the plan of Chicago and adopted similar approaches, making Burnham's ideas the foundation for urban planning across America. His influence extended internationally as well, with cities in Europe, Asia, and South America requesting his expertise for their own development plans. Burnham traveled to Manila in 1905 to design a comprehensive plan for the Philippine capital under American colonial administration. His plan created the Civic Center, established a park system, and designed the broad boulevards that still characterize Manila's urban core. He developed plans for San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake, though the city tragically ignored most of his recommendations and rebuilt haphazardly. Despite his enormous influence and the widespread adoption of his planning principles, Daniel Burnham faced constant criticism from academic architects and design critics. They dismissed his neoclassical style as unoriginal and backward-looking, favoring the emerging modernist movement with its emphasis on functionalism and rejection of historical ornament. Influential critics like Lewis Mumford attacked Burnham's work as shallow and concerned only with superficial beauty rather than addressing the deeper social problems of urban life. They argued that his City Beautiful movement created impressive public buildings and parks but ignored issues of housing, poverty, and industrial working conditions. These criticisms, while partially valid, ignored the revolutionary impact of Burnham's comprehensive approach to urban planning. His insistence that cities needed coordinated development, his integration of natural spaces with urban infrastructure, and his emphasis on long-term planning became the foundation of modern urban design. Every American city today that has preserved parkland, developed lakefront or riverfront public spaces, or implemented comprehensive zoning owes a debt to Burnham's pioneering work. Daniel Burnham died on June 1, 1912, at age 65 while traveling in Heidelberg, Germany. He had transformed American urban planning, designed iconic buildings and city plans that would shape the nation for generations, and established the principles that guide urban development to this day. Yet his obituaries focused mainly on his architectural buildings rather than his revolutionary city planning work, and within decades his name was fading from public consciousness. The modernist movement that dominated 20th-century architecture deliberately rejected Burnham's approaches, viewing his neoclassical designs and emphasis on civic beauty as outdated. Architectural historians writing in the 1930s through 1960s largely ignored his contributions, focusing instead on European modernists and the international style. Academic programs taught city planning without mentioning Burnham's pioneering work, attributing the development of comprehensive urban planning to later figures who had actually built on his foundation. His architectural partnership with John Root also complicated his legacy. Some historians argued that Root was the true genius of the partnership, responsible for the artistic brilliance while Burnham merely handled business matters. This narrative diminished Burnham's achievements in both architecture and urban planning, suggesting he was more administrator than creative visionary. By the late 20th century, Daniel Burnham had become what architectural historians call a forgotten figure, someone whose influence was so thoroughly absorbed into standard practice that his original contributions were no longer recognized. Every urban planner uses approaches Burnham pioneered. Every American city incorporates principles he established, yet his name appears rarely in professional education or public discourse about the built environment. In recent decades, some scholars have begun reassessing Burnham's legacy and recognizing his monumental contributions to American urban design. Books like Erik Larson's The Devil in the White City introduced new audiences to Burnham's work on the Columbian Exposition. Urban planning historians have acknowledged that his comprehensive approach laid the groundwork for modern city planning methodology. His famous motto, "Make no little plans," became a rallying cry for ambitious urban projects, though many who quote it don't know its origin. Today, more than a century after his death, Americans live in urban environments shaped by Daniel Burnham's vision without knowing his name. The lakefront parks where families gather, the diagonal boulevards that ease traffic flow, the forest preserves that provide natural recreation areas, the integration of civic beauty with urban functionality, all reflect principles he established and promoted. Washington, D.C.'s monumental core, Chicago's lakefront, Manila's civic center, and countless other urban landscapes bear his imprint, yet few recognize the architect who designed the comprehensive vision. The story of Daniel Burnham is about how professional rivalries and changing aesthetic fashions can erase even the most influential figures from historical memory. It reveals how revolutionary ideas, once absorbed into standard practice, lose their connection to the visionaries who originated them. It shows how comprehensive thinking and long-term planning, while less dramatic than individual iconic buildings, ultimately shape how millions of people experience daily life in urban America. Every time you walk through a city park, drive on a planned boulevard, or enjoy a lakefront public space, remember the forgotten architect who believed cities should be designed for beauty and human flourishing, not just commercial profit. His visionary plans created the framework for modern American cities, even if history forgot to write his name on the buildings and parks he imagined into existence.